Hello my fiery friends, this is the Infernoman here with another budget deck tech for you today. Today we're going to be going over Izzet Delver. The deck only utilizes 8 rares and it's all in the land base, so on MTGArena this is a very easy deck to put together. But as always, if you are new to this channel, let's show you again how we're going to explain this. First off, we talk about the creatures in the deck first, we go over the non-creature spells, we'll talk about the land base, we'll go over the sideboard, we'll have a couple matches against Sparky to show you how the deck is meant to be played, and if you are a fan of this, please make sure to check out the end of the video to show you upgrades on how you can make this deck even better. But before we dive into it, if you are a fan of any of the videos and stuff that I do, please make sure to give a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to see all of the content that I have and more. It only takes a couple seconds and I really would appreciate it. But enough of me shilling, let's go ahead and dive right in. Now to begin, we're only utilizing 14 creatures in the deck, which is honestly all you need. You only want to play 1 or 2 major threats and then ride them out to victory. To begin, we're going to be talking about the mainstay card in the deck, which is obviously the Delver of Secrets. This card of course needs no introduction. Basically you want to play this card and you want to ideally flip it by revealing an instant or sorcery the next turn you have it on play to make it a flying 3/2, which is a very powerful threat if you can get it down ideally on turn 2. Of course, that's not the only card we're going to be utilizing in the deck. We also have a backup plan, which is going to be our Dragon's Rage Channeler, a 1/1 human shaman with, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Surveil 1. Also has Delirium, which means if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, you get to make this a 3/3 with flying. Granted, you have to attack each combat turn, but that's not a big deal for us. We want to be super aggressive. We want to try to smash our opponent as fast as possible. Ideally, you want to have on turn 1 or the other and ensure that you can start triggering off their ability in the hopes of trying to get a 3-power flyer in the air by ideally turn 2 or turn 3 and then start putting a big threat on your opponent's life. In the 2-drop slot, we're going to be utilizing Sprite Dragon, which is also another sweet card that triggers off and synergizes extremely well with our game plan. Sprite Dragon, as you can see, is a fairy dragon with flying and haste, and it's a 1/1. But whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. This card gets out of control if your opponent does not have a way of dealing with it. We'll show you, of course, the non-creature spells that can support it and protect this card from getting blown up. But if you can get it out also on turn 2, along with either the Dragon's Rage Channeler or the Delver of Secrets, you are going to have a very powerful set of flyers on board. However, we also be utilizing Crackling Drake. Crackling Drake is a X and 4, where X's power is equal to the number of instants or sorceries in its graveyard or in exile. So even if your opponent has graveyard hate, Crackling Drake will be our backup card to help us fly to victory. What makes Crackling Drake so sweet, of course, is even if our graveyard gets exiled, as you can see, it still maintains its power level. So honestly, that doesn't even make a big deal for us. Save this card as your finisher. Also, one other small note, when it comes in, you get to draw a card. Not a big deal, but again, it is a sweet little bonus just to play it. But otherwise, that's all I got for you for all the creatures. Let's now cover the non-creature spells to support this game plan. Now, as for your non-creature spells, you have a total of 28, a mixture of 26 instants and sorceries, and 2 artifacts in the main deck. Of course, you want to ensure that you can trigger off Delirium as soon as possible, so that way both the Unholy Heat, which we'll talk about in just a second, will be able to reach its maximum potential, along with the Dragon's Rage Channeler, and of course, the Delver of Secrets can flip. To begin, we'll go over Consider, and of course the other card we'll talk about will be Otherworldly Gaze. Both of these cards are going to be important because it helps us set up our card draws, and it also ensures that we can get what we need into the yard as soon as possible. Granted, we don't have Brainstorm in the format because it got banned, but Otherworldly Gaze actually does a really good job substituting that. Speaking of the Delirium we just talked about, our other card is going to be Unholy Heat. Unholy Heat deals 2 damage to a target creature or planeswalker, but with Delirium triggered, we can now do 6 damage to that target, which is a really amazing amount of value we get. This card works great in the early game if you just need to pick off maybe a mana dork, but also works great in the mid to late game. Lofty Denial is going to be your counter spell to protect what we are trying to do, and again, it gets much more better once we have a flyer in play. Granted, it is a little risky to play it until our Delver of Secrets flips or the Dragon Rage Channeler gains flying, but honestly, the risk is well worth to play it. Static Discharge is going to be our slow sorcery speed burn spell, however, it gains a lot more value as the game progresses. If you do manage to get the maximum potential out of it, you can technically do up to 18 damage with all 4 copies, but don't count on that. Mostly this is going to be something that you can either use to get rid of a pesky creature, or you can just use it to go straight to face, pumping up your other creatures, getting cards into the yard to make it better. Good for the mid and late game. But of course, besides these cards, the other main value card that you have in your deck is going to be Expressive Iteration. You've seen this card, I'm sure, many times if you played on the ladder. It's a card that lets you dig 3 deep. You can put one card into your hand, put one inside the back of your deck, and the other card goes into exile, which you can play this turn. Ideally, you should be putting the land card into exile. You should be putting something that you need for the later part of the game into your hand, and something that you may not need at the moment just goes back into the deck. Honestly, it's just really a sweet card. With the way our deck runs, you in theory could actually get all 3 cards, which I'll show you an example coming up. And our final card is You Find the Villain's Lair. Actually a very underrated budget card that I actually really like. You can either choose to counter a target spell, or you can draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards, which again, synergizes perfectly with our game plan. But otherwise, that is it for the non-creature spells in the deck. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention, Ether Spellbomb. If you have one creature that you just can't deal with, either with burn or counter spells, Ether Spellbomb is a great little delayed way to either bounce something back to their hand, or if we don't need it, we can draw a card with it, so it replaces itself. But otherwise, sorry for that, I forgot to mention that. Actually, a really underrated card, and I highly recommend don't underestimate this. Otherwise, let's now cover the land base. As far as your mana base is concerned, it's a very small but straightforward set. You'll have 18 lands total, which does look very low, but consider that the way the deck is run with a lot of churning through your deck, throwing stuff into the graveyard, you shouldn't have a problem actually getting to the land drops you need. You'll have 3 islands, 3 mountains, 4 of the pathway lands, 4 steam vents, 3 copies of Evolving Wilds, and a single copy of Field of Ruin to deal with the pesky creature lands that sometimes come into play. But otherwise, that's basically it. Very straightforward, no muss, no fuss here. Let's go ahead and talk about now your sideboard. Now, as far as your sideboard is concerned, you're going to have a small mixture of things, and as always, please make sure to update your sideboard depending on what the meta has. Again, we're going to have an extra copy of Ether Spellbomb, 2 copies of Spell Pierce. You can argue Mystical Dispute might be better here. This is going to come down to personal preference. Just pick whatever you feel is going to be better. 2 copies of Soul Guide Lantern as your graveyard hate, and also you can trigger it off to draw a card if you don't need to exile a graveyard. 2 copies of Ether Gust that helps bounce back those green and red spells that we can't deal with, especially the ones that can't be countered. 2 copies of Riddle Form, which is going to be a great way to bring something in case if your creatures keep getting blown up by targeted removal. And of course, the Scry ability is also a pretty sweet little bonus on top of it. 2 copies of Fry, which again, they can't be countered, and also deals with blue and white planeswalkers, mainly to fairies. 2 copies of Abrade to deal with more creature targeted removal and get rid of some artifacts. And finally, your Flame Sweeps. Flame Sweeps to just deal with the pesky token decks that are running around out there. But otherwise, that's basically it. I don't have anything else to add to you, except let's now go ahead and play against Sparky and show you how this deck is meant to be run. Alright everyone, here we go. We're going to be playing now against Sparky, and we're going to show you again, ideally, how you should be trying to play this deck. So as you can see right here in our opening hand, we don't have blue mana. Oh man, this is going to be a little awkward. You could probably keep this hand in some matchups, but you most likely shouldn't be mulliganing. Alright, so let's see. Alright, we got our 2 pathway lands, either Spellbomb to bounce, Sprite Dragon. Okay, this is a pretty good hand. We're going to keep this one, and just remember again, turn 1, it should be either Dragon's Rage Channeler or the Delver of Secrets. Ideally, Delver of Secrets should be your first choice. So let's go ahead, we will keep this. We'll need to try to figure out what we want to put back. And with that, we'll probably put back the Ether Spellbomb for the time being. We probably won't need that. We just want to get the gas that we need to start just going off. So with that, we'll then place down our Riverguide Pathway, Delver of Secrets, and now it's Sparky's turn. So again, I'm going to keep reiterating this. Ideally, if you can get this to flip, and looks like we just did, sweet. Find the Villain's Lair as our instant, we reveal, and now we have our awesome 3/2 flyer. So now we can do 3 damage by turn 2. We'll put down our Sprite Dragon. So this is actually your ideal opening couple of turns. 4 damage already by turn 2. Sparky doesn't really have a major threat that bothers us. We now have the mana, technically, to keep up a counterspell, but it's the early part of the game. You can either use the Static Discharge right now to burn out the creature, but because we're already flying, we don't have to worry about having to deal with it. So we'll go straight to face with our Static Discharge, bumping up the Sprite Dragon. Heals 13. They go down to 8, and wow, okay. We're basically about to close out this game in only 4 turns. So there you go. I honestly don't have much else to say, except this is more or less what you want to do. We will just attack right now. And actually, you can use the Find the Villain's Lair now. We'll then pump up our creature one more time. We'll discard 2 cards. We don't need the Dragon's Rage Channel at this point, so we're going to just drop it off. Drop off the mountain. We don't need that either. We can crack our Evolving Wilds as well. Most of this doesn't even matter at this point, because you can see basically by turn 4, you could get the win here. We're going to go to turn 5, but you basically get the idea. I honestly don't know what else to say except that was perfect. That's exactly what you want this deck to do. They can do their swings, doesn't matter. Here we go. We just will put in the Dragon's Rage Channeler just because, why not? Otherworldly Gaze, same thing, irrelevant at this point, but we'll just do it to pump up the Sprite Dragon. You can see the triggers going off. You can just dump off another card to the yard. At this point, you can just dump everything as well. But if we needed any of that stuff like the Ether Spellbomb, we could have done it right there. But there you go. That's all I got for you guys. All right. Enough of this. Let's go to game 2. We're going to switch out some of the cards from the sideboard, and we're going to show you another way you can play this deck. Okay, so here we go with our second match. We're going to show you right now, again, with a couple of cards we just swapped out, how you can take advantage of anticipating different kinds of game styles. So in this case, we're going to be putting down our Pathway lands. We have a Delver of Secrets here, but our opponent put down red first. We might be anticipating a burn spell to blow up our Delver of Secrets. In this case, however, we do have a Riddle form. The Riddle form can't be touched by anything usually that red has. So we're going to try to put that out first, and then we're going to try to see what they will possibly play. So let's go ahead and play the Riddle form. And as it goes down, obviously red's not going to have anything to deal with enchantments, so it's a pretty safe play. And there it is. There was the shock. That shock actually would have gone to our Delver if we put it out there. So thankfully, we avoided that. Okay, so next, they could still have more burn spells. So, how do we want to do this? We do have a Flame Sweep, but we'll play Expressive Iteration. Now, we could turn it on right now, but again, I'm anticipating that they probably have another burn spell if they have 2 mountains. So in this case, we will choose to, let's see, do we want to decline take action? We'll decline and play it safe. And we will then have our Expressive Iteration. So we'll put the first Expressive Iteration into our hand. Second card goes to the bottom, which will be the Mountain. And this means we can play the Evolving Wilds on this turn, which actually would get us back the Mountain we just put back into our deck. So there you go. That's a way you can get some card advantage there. Filtering out your deck, thinning it out, just getting the maximum amount of value out of that Expressive Iteration. All right, Goblin Gathering. This is actually perfect. Remember how I just mentioned earlier the tokens can be taken out with Flame Sweep? We're going to keep that in a bit. But before we use it, let's go ahead. We're going to put down our Delver of Secrets. We'll pass. Opponent. Sparky, what do you got? They have a Minotaur out, which is thankfully something we can take care of with our Upgrade. But we're going to time this correctly. Tinsery Cadet. All right, they are all tapped out, which is perfect. So they're going to swing. Watch. There you go. There you go. Swinging. We'll Upgrade. But we are not going to hit a token, we're going to hit that Minotaur. This triggers Riddle form. We now turn it into a 3/3 flyer. And now we can actually block with the Riddle form. Since they're all tapped out, there's nothing else Sparky's going to be able to do. So we now just minimize the damage. Reveal, nothing there, just a land. So unfortunately our Delver does not flip, which is unfortunate, but that's not a big deal. Okay, next. Let's play Expressive Iteration again. Remember, don't put your land drop if you have an Expressive Iteration. If you can afford it, Expressive Iteration first. Alright, get the Unholy Heat Consider and a second Riddle form. Okay, so we want to play a second Riddle form. We'll put that into our hand. We will put the Consider down to the bottom. And this will allow us now to have Unholy Heat in exile, which we will play obviously right now. Our second Riddle form's already gone off. We'll put down our Delver, number 2. And now we can play the Unholy Heat. Go ahead and take care of this Tinsery Cadet, because that ability of his is not a big deal, but it can get very annoying. So this, of course, means that Riddle form would have triggered again, but we already have it out. Swing for 4 damage. They're down to 16. All right. What do you got, Sparky? 5 mana down. They got plenty of stuff they can do. Okay, reduce to ashes. Gets rid of 1 Delver, but again, not a big deal. They wasted a lot of mana on that. All right, so we reveal again our Villain's Lair. All right, Delver flips, which is really nice because we can definitely start filtering out stuff we don't need. You know what's kind of cute here? Riddle form triggers off Riddle form, which is also pretty awesome. All right, 6 damage. They're now down to 10. All right, we're closing the gap here. And let's see. What do we want to do? Well, now's the time. We Flame Sweep the board. This does turn on our Riddle forms, but remember, Flame Sweep does not hit flyers, so this is actually a perfect play right now. Get rid of the creatures. Our things come out unscathed. We will now swing, doing 9 damage to Sparky. Oh, I wish Dragon's Rage Channeler had haste. That's okay. We'll still play it anyway. So, there we go. That's basically it, everyone. So there you go. That's how you can utilize all of the sideboard cards in matches like this, where you need to go a little bit more creature removal. We'll block the Nest Robber, just because. Oh no, Storm Strike! got a Sparky. Wow, big brain move there. But there you go, everyone. I honestly don't have anything else for you, just like the first match. If everything goes according to plan, look at how quickly you can close out games. Obviously, it's never going to be obviously this perfect, but in many instances, you can get some surprise quick wins if your opponent is being a little on the slow side. But that's all I got for you guys. Enough of this. Let's go ahead and now talk about how you can upgrade the deck. Now, if you do want to upgrade the deck, you can have a couple of essentials, but most of the upgrades I would actually say are more or less just if you have them, why not? So for example, the one thing I would definitely upgrade first off would be the mana base. Get rid of your Evolving Wilds, put in the Fable Passages. You can keep one Field of Ruin if you really are paranoid about creature lands. Otherwise, get a full playset of those. Gives you consistency with your mana base. Next card I would definitely upgrade would be, instead of the Crackling Drake, 2 copies of Stormwing Entity at bare minimum. Its abilities are really sweet. A set of Archmage's Charms. These can replace the Find the Villains Lair, but this one's going to be more subjective, because Find the Villains Lair, sometimes you actually want cards to go into your graveyard. Sometimes you actually just want to have 2 cards straight out without any downside, still count as a target spell, and sometimes being able to gain control of a non-land permanent with a mana value of 1 or less can be sometimes good, sometimes bad. It really just depends. It just is a sweet option, if you can afford it. Not much else I would otherwise recommend in the main board. This is pretty much all you need. For the sideboard, it's even more subjective. You can put in Smoldering Egg. That's something that I actually really like this card, and it's a good way to kind of have games end. Great blocker. I mean, if you can flip it, it then basically is like a mini Niv Mizzet. Other options I would consider, again, you could probably drop a copy of Either Gust, put in a copy of Disdainful Stroke if you are more worried about the control packages out there. Other things you can consider, again, if you're dealing with more of the Azorius control decks, you have a chance to probably put in something like Mystical Dispute. You have options besides using Spell Pierce. Again, I'm just going to reiterate one more time. It's up to your personal preference. If you think one is better than the other, if you think the meta is going a certain way, just, adjust to what you need to. And then the only other thing I would possibly consider would be Prismari Command. Getting rid of your Abrades for Prismari Command for, again, costs a little bit more at 1 extra mana for 3, but however, you get to choose 2 options, which you can still destroy an artifact like Abrade. You can do 2 damage to any target instead of 3 damage to a creature, but the other options are mostly what makes it that much better. Being able to create a treasure token for ramp, being able to draw and discard can also be a replacement for the Archmage's Charms if you have those in well. Again, all of this stuff is subjective, but at the very minimum, just adjust for Fable Passage. And everything else you can actually keep, and honestly, that's all you need. Again, this is actually a pretty optimized deck personally, as is. If you want to invest even more beyond this, I mean, that's going to be up to you, but those probably would then change the whole purpose of the deck. And there you have it. That is Izzet Delver for you, utilizing some of the most powerful 1-drop, 2-drop cards in the entire historic format. But you tell me below in the comments, what do you think? Are you a fan of these styles of decks? Or are you just trying to look at ways of how you can beat these styles of decks with maybe the types that you play as? Let me know again. I would love to hear from all y'all. If you want to see me do more of these budget style decks, I'm more than happy to do them. I actually do have ideas again where I want to put out maybe just a couple of Brawl deck techs, but it all depends on if people actually want to see that kind of content. But aside from that, thanks again for watching, everyone. Please make sure once again to give a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to see all of the deck techs, pack openings in my shorts, and more. And just remember, however, that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later.